the best part.
Good evening. It's Wednesday at 9 p.m. I'm Mike Z.
I am still Chris, as far as I know.
And our guest today is a Mr. Kyle Ely. You like that?
How'd you pronounce that, Mike?
Ely.
Oh, okay.
From LearnYourCNC.com. Sorry, this entire time, 14.2 episodes into it, I've been saying his name wrong, so I was
I get it all the time.
I loved it. I was like, oh, well, then I'm just going to make fun of that everywhere. All the posts, everything, and basically the fact that I've gotten that wrong. So welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is the Whatnot Podcast. And tonight we are going to be talking about what you need to know before you get into CNC.
Yeah, so we decided, since that's what we're going to be talking about, we thought we'd bring Mr. CNC himself on board, and we recruited his knowledge, and so we're going to take advantage of him tonight, I guess. That's the way we'll put it. And whatnot.
So, in case you don't know, Kyle has created this website. It is called LearnYourCNC.com, and what they have that he's put together is a master course about Vectric, and it comes in 2 packages. So I'll let him do all the explaining and everything about that. But basically, if you are interested in getting into learning Vectric, which is this whole thing's not sponsored by Vectric in any way, right?
No.
Okay, so it's just a software that you picked up, you learned, you enjoyed it, and then you decided, hey, I want to show other people how to use it. So, yeah. Cool. And so we'll kind of get into that a little bit. And there's John. Good evening, John. Thank you for joining us. All right.
And we're sure it's John. Oh, here we go. Here's Johnny. Yeah, there we go. Always good to know who's joining the crowd there.
Absolutely. So I'm going to pretty much let you guys drive this one, and I'll just ask the questions from the newbie side.
Okay. Well, I know CNC is one of those topics that that a lot of times people get intimidated by it, or they just completely shut it out as not an option in their woodworking, or they may even consider CNC not real woodworking at all. And so, if you're one of those, just hang on.
This happens from time to time.
Uh-oh. We lost him.
Yep. He's in deep thought at the moment.
Listen in, and you might change your buffering. Oh, there we go. We're back.
Hey. Right. So whatever you just said was the most important brief, maybe 13 seconds of your life. We apologize. We missed it.
And that's about all we have to say on the topic. But no, CNC is a lot of fun. I had the privilege when I worked for a company that we sold router bits and CNC bits, and when I came on board, they were still trying to figure out how to market them. Well, their particular clientele was 100% industrial, so that they weren't your, small hobby guy and stuff like that. So one of my main jobs was to try to get some of those CNC bits marketed. So I got the privilege of working with a lot of commercial and industrial CNC people, and I'll tell you, some of those operators, I learned a lot, and it just really just created a fire. And I knew one day I would have a CNC. Little did I know it was as soon as it was. But so that's really what got me really interested into CNC, was just being around all those operators and seeing all those things that they were making, and not just cutting sheets of plywood to size or anything like that, but just other things they were creating. And so that's kind of what led me down the path to get into CNC. What about you, Kyle?
Well, basically, I was always in technology because I grew up in where all the computers were coming in. And then middle school. It's about what, 8th grade, I think. Took a wood shop class, and then I was hooked on making stuff out of wood. My grandfather said, "Oh, I make stuff out of wood too." So he showed me a lot of stuff, and then kind of just combined them two, the technology and the wood. I was 16 and found out about CNC machines, and found out online a place you can build one yourself. So I'm like, oh, try this out. I built a whole CNC by myself in my bedroom. So
Nice.
that was a fun experience. So I was buying tools to build it as I was going, and then built it. And then as soon as I built it, I'm like, okay, now what? I don't even know how to run this thing. I just wanted to have one. Just didn't think about it, how to use it. So I figured I'd just figure it out as I go. So that was the hard part, learning how to use it, because back then there wasn't that many places to find videos and stuff how to use them. So basically, I just learned it as I went along. Wasn't the best at it, but got better. And then later on, more like the X-Carve came popular when like companies like that started making hobby machines a little bit more affordable. So I bought one of those on a pre-order, try one of those out, and then got that and got more into it then. I found a couple of people that I would make a lot of signs for, and then all of a sudden I was getting way too many sign requests, and I was using the free easel software that the X-Carve came with, and it just wasn't holding up for me. So that's when I upgraded to Vectric and realized how much potential that has. And then I started learning that as I went along. Was okay with it, wasn't the best at it. Then ended up getting a CNC job. So I was running industrial sized machines, and I just had a beginner's knowledge when I started that job, and quickly grew and learned as I went along. And I used AutoCAD there, and then I told them about Vectric, and they said, "Oh, it'd be interesting to try it out." So I brought my Vectric software to try it out there, and that's where I really learned Vectric, because I had a lot of time to spend on it every day.
Okay.
And then that's when I really took off with Vectric and got really good at it. And then I just started helping people on the Facebook groups and just grew from there.
Cool.
No, that's awesome. So there was a video that you had where you were doing like a vacuum holding a 250-pound door, it looked like, to
Yeah.
do the ends. And so is that the day job?
That's the current day job. Yep.
Okay. That's pretty awesome. Because when I saw that, I thought, man, this is really industrial. For some reason, I couldn't imagine that this was at your house. You know?
No, definitely
And when
not.
I saw that, what was it, a 30-year-old machine? Well, no,
Yeah.
how old was that machine? 30 years?
Yep.
I was like, okay, never mind. This must be the day job. But yeah, that
Yeah.
was neat.
Yeah, since he started when he was 16 and now he's 19. I mean, he's only been in the CNC 3 years.
27.
Grown quite a bit. When he said middle school, I'm thinking to myself, man, what day are we talking about here? Because really, when did CNC for the home user start to take off? What year?
I would say probably like 2014, 20, somewhere in that area.
Okay.
But that was like first beginner. I think the X-Carve was one of the bigger, more known, smaller machines that came out that was affordable. And they started giving them away to content creators, and that's where they really became popular.
That's right. Because I remember seeing those in like 2016, and then they had Inventables was like a website where people would have files that they would upload for it and kind of support it in a way.
Yeah, Inventables is the one that makes the X-Carve.
Okay. That's why I saw it. That's why I'm putting it all together. See, like I said, I have zero clue about this. I have little bits and pieces. That's about it.
He's just missing the corners of the puzzle, but that's okay.
Don't worry about the chamfered corners.
This is about CNC. We're not going down that talk.
Well, we do have to ask that question, though. See what Kyle, are you team chamfer or team roundover?
I think we established this.
Yes.
Yeah, he's chamfer, so
Can't
way to
draw,
just
but
rub that dirt in my face. I appreciate that.
not
But
dirt.
I do appreciate a
Metal.
round over.
Yeah, see, he has an appreciation for
I got
it.
a project tomorrow. I'm going to be putting a round over on, just so you know.
So you're a hypocrite. I see.
He's got to make money too.
This is a child's toy. I got to keep it smooth on the
Okay.
corners.
Right. Well, for my day job, I ended up getting recruited because I hadn't personally had a ton of experience, on CNC, but for my day job, 3 years ago, I kind of took over the role of kind of steamrolling the CNC program at work, and so we carry a few different brands, and so really, for me to be able to learn them better and not just learn how to use them, but to be able to talk about them, especially the brands that we carried, I started playing with them and was able to convince my boss man at the time, and I don't know if he regrets it yet or not, but each of the brands, I was bringing them home for a month, and they just spent a month just diving into them, and at the time I didn't own one. So I was utilizing the crap out of these things. I bet, I was out there in my shop at night working, I don't know, what would you say, Mike, 30, 40 hours a week?
Mm-hmm.
And so at night I was at late at night, like midnight to 2, I was doing design. And when I'd get home from work from 5:30 to, 11:30, I was in my shop actually running CNC. So I was diving in head first on both the software and the machines. But and I've helped other people who've had some of the X-Carves and the Shipokos and some of the smaller machines, and so it's really interesting to be able to see the difference between all of the machines that are available, both not only the size they cut, and that's typically the first thing people want to know is, well, I want that one because it'll cut this size. But in reality, that's one of the topics that really ought to be looked at, probably third or fourth down on the list. And so it helped me to understand kind of what sort of went into the CNC, and especially for that entry-level market. When you start getting into the industrial machines, those true 4x8s and larger, none of us out of the gate are going to be a Izzy Swan with a 24-foot CNC two gantry system. I mean, if you are, then I want your budget. But so tonight we kind of want to just talk about what the average Joe who has either zero experience or has a little bit of experience but really wants to get more in depth to get into the CNC on their own. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about. Some of the things that might be important to you to look at, maybe some things you haven't thought about. And of course, while you're watching this, or if you're watching this after the fact, if you got questions, drop them in the comments and we'll be more than happy to answer them. And so, hopefully this will kind of be of a back and forth dialogue, but between Kyle's,
industrial side as well as his professional side. Tony, you get used to it. It's okay. But I did notice his
3 years
video quality
experience.
got better. Oh, sorry. Now he's back.
Oh, welcome. I lost you too. Was it me or you?
It was you, because we were talking about Team Chamfer while you were gone.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, who won? Oh,
We can't tell you.
okay. So that's kind of what we want to talk about tonight, is what the beginner would look for in a CNC and some of the things that you might want to consider when getting into it. Now, just so you have a little more background on Kyle, just so he's not just some Joe Schmo who learned software and kind of just does it on the side. You just made a pretty important list this year, didn't you? When it comes to Vectric?
Oh, you talk about for my blog?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was on the top 10 CNC blogs of 2021.
Well, congrats.
Thank you.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
so you're not dealing with just some guy who thinks he knows. He knows. So let's kind of get in on one of the main things that I don't know. I think I've got a gnat or something that's just absolutely driving me nuts. So if you catch me clapping, it's not for myself.
That gnat's on Team Chamfer.
Probably. I'm always on the outskirts. But I don't know about you, Kyle. When you're talking to some of your students about CNC, one of the when I'm talking to customers, one of the first things I lead before I start talking about machines and budget and size is I try to get into their head about what kind of projects they want to do, or what do they want to use the CNC for. And that's one of my top questions, and I don't know what your thoughts on that would be.
Yeah, exactly. That's just like when I made it, my first CNC, I had no idea what I wanted to cut. I just wanted to cut stuff. So you just want it for fun, or if you want to start a business or something, you really got to keep that into consideration as far as constraints and stuff with whatever machine you pick.
Yeah, and it's real easy to get caught up in marketing and social media and people you see, using these things. But like Kyle said, there were companies that were giving these things away, by the dozens early on, and that's the bulk of the reason why you see some of these flooded in the market. And now you see a lot of them kind of moving on to a little bigger machines and a little more power, a little more capacity, a little better quality builds and things like that.
Got a question here. It's Louise says, I'm going to buy a wood 4" by 8", maybe 4x8. Green Bowl V2 from Build Your CNC. Did you know this model?
That's actually the company that I first got my plans from when I built my first machine.
Was Green Bowl?
No, the Build Your CNC.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, they've been around for a long time. So they do make good quality. They sell the plans. They don't sell the actual machine. Sometimes they sell the kits. You just put the kits together. But they're all wood machines, so they're not like something you can push really fast or anything. But they are good quality. But they're basically, I would say, beginner to intermediate. But I wouldn't go too much production work on one of those.
It's kind of like a Bob's.
Yeah, exactly. Great for beginners, and just if you want to use it as a hobby or just to make some things to sell.
So kind of like smaller signs, maybe smaller trays.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that one's 4x8, so you can cut sheet goods with that. But like I said, you can't push it like super fast, being all wood.
Okay.
It's a lot of Baltic birch goes into a CNC. I've kind of browsed some of those Bob CNC and just was amazed at it's like, okay, that's a lot of plywood.
Yeah.
So let me ask this: with the rising price of wood, would would it be kind of comparable now to buy one that's metal for faster pushing on the beginner, or is it still kind of a cool factor to build your own out of wood?
I don't know. I think the metal kind of still went up as well with the wood. I don't know exactly how much metals went up, but the wood one is more like you have fun building it. It's more of like an experience, and you could say, I built that. Whereas you buy one already made, it's just another tool.
It's an erector set. Yeah.
It's like a big boy tinker toy.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I mean, that's kind of the way I think, when you're talking about what kind of projects. I mean, like you said, are you looking to do production cutting of sheet goods, or are you wanting to get into very intricate 3D modeling and 3D parts? Are you wanting to have a good blend of both? Are you want to do signs that are 8 feet long? So there's a lot of things you got to think about when you're dealing with the CNC. And if you do have the need, even if you're looking to get into this from a hobby perspective, you got to look at your project type before you start getting into the CNC side, because that really will drive which direction you need to look. Because if you're wanting to do huge outdoor signs, there's really no need in looking at a Shark SD 120 or 110 that's 12 by 12. It's not going to serve your purpose. So, just some of those thoughts like that, you really got to drive into that before you start researching which machine's going to be right for you.
This is sorry.
I was just asking, any other thoughts on that?
So for Rich French says, that for production work, intermediate aluminum frame kit that you can build yourself. Look at the Avid line. That's one of the ones that Easy Swan did have
Yeah, that's the one he
prior.
has now, right? Yeah,
No,
he has.
he sold that off to Nick over at Stated Woods. He's another North Carolina guy, and then I don't remember what he got now, but he's got something else. But that was a pretty
Phantom. Not, is it
Phantom.
Phantom? Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. He was a
It
kid.
was a pretty nice setup on that Avid. Like I really liked the gantry. The entire build quality of it in general is pretty cool.
And hi, I want to say hi, Rick. By the way, Rick's in my course, and so is Kevin.
Smart guys.
Yes, they are.
Which, by the way, I'm up to chapter 4 in your master course. So
Nice.
taking my time and taking the test and
It's a good thing about it. You take it at your own pace.
yep. So once you kind of have an idea of what kind of projects you want to do, then you can start leaning into, okay, what kind of machine, what type of machine is going to be best for me. And when you start looking at that, there's a lot of options. We've already been talking about some of these build your own kits, whether it be from wood or from metal, aluminum. So that question leads to, do you want to build your own? It's going to be more economical, but you're going to have a ton of labor built into it leading up to that. Now, there are some advantages of building your own, whether it's out of wood or out of aluminum, and that is you truly know your machine before you ever turn it on.
Yeah, exactly.
You're very intimate with wiring, and you understand, the structural integrity of the machine and how to set it up and get everything accurate. So there's a lot of details that you got to be comfortable with. You have to feel confident in your mechanical skills to be able to want to start in with a machine that you build or you assemble.
Sometimes you know more about it than you want to.
Well, and that's kind of where some people really have no interest. They just want to buy a machine, maybe assemble a couple of parts just to get it up and running, and they just want a sort of a turnkey operation. And that's kind of when you would lean to other entry level machines that are out there. The X-Carve, the Shipoko, those are two that come to mind that are on the very lower end of the price point spectrum. Then you start getting into like the next waves, Axiom, Digital Woodcarver. Those are sort of three brands that are really popular for that smaller entry-level market that I can think of.
The one that I see that's growing really quick right now is Onefinity.
Mm-hmm.
They seem to be a really good machine. Seem to be pretty sturdy because they have those big posts, and then they also have easy setup, and it has the ball screw driven, which is way better than the belts.
Yep.
So that seems like a pretty good machine.
Yeah, and that was kind of one of the subtopics that I was going to hint on is some of the manufacturing that goes into these some entry level machines. Is it a ball screw or is it a belt or is it rack and pinion? I mean, what drives the system there?
So as someone who doesn't know about it, but I've heard these terms, what is going to be important for me moving forward as far as maintenance goes out of those different types of systems? Like, I'm someone who likes to get out in the shop, put the software in, run it, and then not have to really worry so much about, hey, is that greased up, that kind of stuff.
Well, as a owner of a belt-driven machine, I could tell you they're not that fun.
Okay.
You have belts that go loose. You have belts that can break mid carve. You have pulleys you got to adjust. It's a lot of work to keep it maintained properly. Also, if the belts stretch over time and you don't notice, your size of your parts will be different than what you're actually trying to carve. So
Okay.
there's a lot of maintenance with the belt-driven system. And then probably the next tier up would be the rack and pinion. So rack and pinion's really quick, but it's really noisy, and there's a little bit of play in the system because you have a gear and a rack and pinion going together. You need to have it a little bit loose to be able to move. If it was a real tight system, it would get bound up. So there is a little bit of play with that. And then probably the highest end of the spectrum there would be the ball-driven. That's basically a ball screw with a threaded rod that would spin, and then your machine would move on that threaded ball screw. And that would be the probably, I wouldn't say the quickest, because rack and pinion can be pretty quick, but it is quick and reliable. So it's like one of the top end. But of course, it's going to be the most expensive.
But on the maintenance side of it, there's just a little bit of grease, clean out the dust, blow it out every once in a while, and you're good to go.
Yeah. Rack and pinion and the ball screw, there's not like a whole lot of maintenance for those systems.
Okay.
But like you said, blow out the dust and maybe grease every once in a while or something.
Yeah, most of those, the bearings need to be greased like 300, 400, 500 hours. The screw needs to be lubricated quite frequently because, I mean, you are metal on metal as that thread is spinning around, but still that's a very minimal maintenance consideration when you look at everything else. And, you know, when you're talking about the ball screw setups, there's even quality differences between different manufacturers on those. All of them are going to be registered in metric, but you'll have some with a really small screw, I mean almost a quarter of an inch. Then you'll have some that have a larger screw that are almost, 3/4, 7/8. So the size of that screw makes a world of difference when you're looking at the repeatability, the accuracy, and the overall quality of the results you'll get.
Yeah, not only that, there's different thread types as well, which make a big difference. You have of course, you have a regular thread like nut and bolt, which would be the worst type of thread for a CNC. And then next step up from that, you have like an Acme thread, which is thread similar to like a F-style clamp. And then up from that, you would have the actual ball screw, which is like a cove going spiral around the rod, which would be the thread. And then the part that would be considered the nut actually has the ball bearings in it that ride inside that groove. And that would be the smoothest system there. But of course, there's also different thread types of that as well.
Yeah.
So as a beginner, someone who's looking at getting into CNC, I want to do the, ball screw is going to tell me for myself that I'm going to have to not have to worry so much. Like if I want a turnkey system, then I'm going to want to look at something like a ball screw, right? If I want to be more mechanically jumping into it, putting it together, then a rack and pinion would be a good option, or belt driven would be a good option, because then I'm invested into the construction of the machine. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Even the rack and pinion isn't so much like a bad system, but it's more like if you're on a budget, but you still want a nice quality machine.
It's kind of right in the middle between.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of any manufacturers that offer what would be considered an entry-level machine that uses rack and pinion. I know Shop Saber uses that on a couple of their lower-end models.
Yeah.
But even those are...
all the Avids are rack and pinion.
Okay. All right.
Most of the Z-axis are ball screw, but mainly the X and Y, the larger axis, are rack and pinion on those.
Yeah, and that's a huge selling point too. I mean, especially the Z, because it's constantly moving up and down, and so you really want to make sure there's something there that's good and stable, and the quality of the bearings that the manufacturer uses makes a world of difference too.
Yeah.
And I guess if we're going to put a label on it, I would say true entry level would be less than 10,000, but you can cut that in half in most cases and still come out with a decent machine. So, I mean, I know there are some very good machines out there for beginners that are in that 4,000 range.
Yeah, I would say beginners, some of the top machines would be the Onefinity, the CNC for newbies, and I wouldn't recommend the X-Carve as much because of the belt-driven system. I mean, it's good if you're on a budget, but you can get the ball screw driven like the Onefinity for around the same price. So I would say that would be a little bit more superior.
Yeah, I know. I had a friend that had a Shapeoko, and he did the complete upgrade to everything with the ball screw, and just had all kinds of problems out of it. So I know there's a lot of Shipoko and X-Carve lovers out there, and if you're one of those, we're not bashing that company at all. We're just offering recommendations on, slightly better alternatives for not
Yeah.
much more money. And I think, was it Myers Woodshop really put Winfinity on the map with some of the stuff he was doing. I think he was one of the first people that I remember seeing that really stepped away from. I think he had, what was it, an X-Carve or Shipoko or both?
I think he had both at one point. Yeah.
And I think he was one of the first ones that really, who had a huge following, that stepped out and
Yeah,
dropped
and
him for the
I
one.
see Two Moose Design is switching right now from X-Carve to Winfinity. But of
Yeah.
course, I think those are sponsored machine. Well, not sponsored, but like sponsored by Winfinity.
Yeah, they've partnered with those
Yeah.
creators to be able to get that. Speaking of which, that's a great lead into what we talked about the past 2 weeks, is partnering with
Yeah.
manufacturers. See, we knew we'd bring it back around full circle.
You did it, the episodes in that order too, just for that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, we planned it 100%. And then while we're here, if you like what you see, please by all means join us on our Patreon at Whatnot Podcast so you can help support what we're doing and buy Chris a new hat.
What, you don't like my hat?
No, you just need a new hat.
Oh, yeah, I could use a new hat. And so there's a lot of options out there. There's not a lack of anything, and I don't think there's one machine I would say, oh yeah, as a beginner, you got to get this one, and I would say that to every single person.
Yeah.
And there are some downfalls with some of those entry-level machines. The one that comes to my mind is power. They're all going to be running on either a smaller spindle. You may be limited to using quarter-inch shank bits only, and if that's a concern, something to consider.
Yep.
As a matter of fact, that was one of the driving points for me upgrading from my Shark HD that I had to the Axiom Pro that I ended up with. Was I really needed something to get rid of that router, because that router noise, if you've never, which is kind of another talking point, router versus spindle, if you've never heard a router sound, I would encourage you to go find one and turn it on before you make that decision.
Yeah. Big difference.
Otherwise, invest in really good safety earmuffs. IsoTunes is a great alternative.
Yeah, IsoTunes are a great alternative. Not sponsored, but yeah, we love our IsoTunes. I was actually going to ask that question because I know there's two options out there, and with tools being hard to get right now, routers especially, would it almost make sense for someone to look at upgrading to the spindle for the long haul?
It's definitely a better option, regardless of whether it's air-cooled or water-cooled. It doesn't matter. They both offer a much better option compared to a router. A router is not designed for a CNC. A spindle is. A router is not designed to be used, 8 hours a day. Not saying it can't be, but it's not designed for that. Mm-hmm. A spindle, air-cooled or water, it doesn't matter, has no problems running at longer periods of time. It's designed to stay cool under a lot of use.
Kevin just said that the router noise used to bother me before I lost my hearing.
That might be why you lost your hearing, Kevin.
Not kidding. I remember doing a lot of routing and just your ears would start to fuzz, and then all of a sudden, like, it got a lot quieter. You're like, oh, okay, good. Now I'm used to it. Mm-hmm. And now realize years later that was not a good idea.
Well, I mean, as a woodworker, I'm used to having the router under the table or in my hands, at waist height, passing by, making grooves or molding. It's quite a different sound when it's up by your face on a CNC. It's like, okay, that I don't ever remember it being that loud before.
Especially for hours at a time.
Yep.
Yeah, I was going to say, because it never ends. It just keeps going.
And most people complain about how loud dust collectors are. Dust collectors don't hold a candle to how loud routers are.
Especially a router with a bad bearing.
Another thing, you got to replace the brushes every now and again in a router with brushes. And that's another potential factor of something happening mid carve of your if your brushes are wearing out, you start a carve and then something happens and then you lose that carve you're just doing.
Well, and another consideration, we've talked about quality. I mean, someone mentioned you get what you pay for, and that's true. I mean, with a router, the spindle on a router is going to have a little bit of deflection to it, regardless of how good a router it is. I don't care that you Festool lovers can say, well, my Festool doesn't. All routers have a little bit of deflection in the spindle part. Spindles do not have that problem generally.
Plus, another thing with spindles is you can make the RPMs lower, which opens up to you a lot more options when you're using your CNC, like drill bits. If you want to drill a hole, most routers cannot go slow enough to spin a drill bit to drill a hole.
So you got more capabilities for a spindle than you would a router.
Yeah.
Plus, you can program the spindle, right? It's part of the controller. With a router, you have to go change the speed. If it's a set speed amount, you have to go change it.
Yeah,
just
some
in the controller, right?
Yeah, some machines have that option. Well, most bigger machines have that option. You can change the speed right in your settings in Vectric or whatever software you use.
Well, and that's an interesting kind of topic too. Is when you start talking about speed, most of your say 2.25 horse routers that you would find in some of your larger entry level machines, those routers, the lowest speed you can typically get on those is about 8 to 10,000. When you start talking about the really small entry level machines that operate off of a palm router, like a laminate trimmer style router, those routers actually have such a high top speed. Usually they're right around 35,000 RPM. Those you can't get much lower than, was it 18?
I think mine's at 16.
Okay,
DeWalt.
Yeah, so 16 to 35,000. 16,000 is not slow enough to use a lot of bits that you're going to need. Now, you might be thinking, well, all I'm going to be doing is cutting, plywood or whatever. You might get to a place where you need to surface a spoil board. Well, that drastically limits your options in spoil board bits, because some of the 1.5 inch diameters and some of the 1.25s that are available in a 1/4 inch shank, you will not be spinning those at 16,000 RPM in a little trim router. You just don't think about it. So there's a lot to consider when you start getting into router versus spindle, and then horsepower of those routers versus the spindles.
Speaking of that, a guy I work with actually, it was a 3/4 inch shank surfacing bit, and he actually had it spinning so fast that it broke the 3/4 inch shank and shot it across the room and almost hit a guy. It was bad, and that was a 3/4 inch shank. So that tells you how important the proper spindle speed is.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother world there.
Yeah.
Rick had said that the less ability to adjust speed on the fly with a router with his spindle, a Mach 4. He starts his speeds conservatively and then bumps up till he gets good chips without chatter.
Yeah.
And then Kevin's got a really good question here, because this is one I was going to ask. What should we be looking for in an air-cooled spindle?
I would say the one thing I would suggest is look for one that like most spindles will be, they'll be evacuating that air out of the top, not out of the bottom. Most routers will evacuate air out of the bottom, and so it doesn't enable it to generate enough cold air to keep those routers running cool. But most spindles will evacuate air out of the top. But the key I would think of most is going to be the horsepower.
Horsepower, another important thing, is pretty obvious, but make sure it fits your machine, because they make all different shapes and sizes.
Yep.
Okay, so something that can actually bolt to your gantry.
Yeah, they usually sell them by the millimeter, so they'll have like a 70 millimeter. It's the diameter of the
body.
spindle itself. Yeah, the body. So that lets you know what it will mount to. And then they have square bodies, they have round bodies, all different sizes.
Yeah, for you woodworkers, that's like trying to fit a router motor into a router lift, and being frustrated because most router lifts were created for Porter Cable 7518s, and now they
no longer exist.
They've pretty much abandoned you. You're now left with Portamate.
Yeah, you're now left with who pretty much was making them in the first place for a while from China. Yeah, that's a sad story to be told one day, not today, but yeah, Porter cable routers, they were the workhorse,
Yeah.
90s and 2000s for all of woodworking.
Yep. And yeah, John, no matter what CNC you have to retrim those from time to time. It's just a general part of maintenance that you just kind of learn to work with. I actually found a really good tramming tool. I had made my first one, but I found a really good one from Stupid Simple Tools. It was inexpensive enough that I felt like I could justify it, and it's got a half a thousandth resolution, so you can easily manipulate that. And it's got a half or quarter inch shank, and then it comes out, and there's 3 slots for those indicators, and the furthest one out is 6 inches. So it'd give you a 6-inch diameter essentially, and that's a very accurate and very good and easy tool to use. I love mine. Reminds me, I got to get that back from our new IT guy.
Let's see. Yeah. So, okay. So, anything else? Let's see. We talked about the travel of the gantry, the best ways, the different ways, the different machines that you could use a spindle or router to actually route. What about the bits themselves?
Well, there's still a lot to discuss on the machines. Well, we can talk about bits if you want to.
Well, what else do you got? I mean, I know that okay, so there is actually, I'm sorry, you're right. The beds, spoil boards, the way they're constructed. What am I going to look for as someone who's starting out in the bed? Like, what should I be looking for in the build quality of the frame itself?
I would say steel frame as a plus for the base.
Yeah.
Okay.
If it has a base, some machines are just tabletop, and then next step down from that would be aluminum, and then after that you're basically into wood. But so I would say steel if you can get it, aluminum if you're on a budget, and then you also have to be mindful of the size of the machine. How big do you want to cut? Also the Z travel, how much thickness do you want to cut, and how much room do you need under the gantry to clear? If you're only cutting 3/4 inch material, then you don't need that much Z height. But if you're cutting big 3D sculptures or something, then you're going to need a lot of Z clearance. So that's another thing to consider. But as far as the spoil board, most of them are just a frame, and you apply your own like MDF or phenolic, or if you have a vacuum table, that's a whole nother topic there.
Do you think a beginner needs a vacuum table, or do you think just clamp down?
Yeah, for a beginner, I would say no vacuum table. That's a big price tag for a beginner, unless you got the budget and you think you'll grow into it. Otherwise, I would say clamps or whatever kind of hold down methods you prefer.
Okay. Yeah, unless you're going to get into, for a fact your main project material is going to be acrylics and plastics, the vacuum table is not needed. And you can, if it's a small machine, there's a lot of templates and jigs and plans on the market of how to build your own little vacuum table, because the smaller machines, it doesn't require a huge vacuum pump. You can use something as simple as a, shop vac. If you decide to do that, you want to make sure that it is in fact a wet dry vac. Otherwise, just a standard shop vac won't work because there's no outlet for that exhaust. But a wet dry vac typically has a bypass, so it can bypass that motor and still exhaust out the way it's supposed to. So,
yeah, I see on tools today that Stepcraft that they use, it seems to be like a shop vac type of vacuum.
It's a fine vac. Fine and Festool make really good vacs for that type of setup because they're German engineered, and they over engineer everything. So they've done a really good job on making sure that those vacs have exhaust regardless of whether it's on the pull in or the push out side. So
yeah.
Yeah, and then they also have bypasses on it to where if you clog it, it'll still it won't ruin the motor. They're very
and speaking of motors, that's kind of another thing is, You won't find this in many of the hardly any of the entry level, but servo motor versus stepper motor, and there's different grades or quality levels, power levels of steppers. I know my first Axiom had 24-watt steppers, and they had an upgrade program, and they upgraded them from 24 to 48. That was a drastic difference in power and torque that was available. And so, stepper motors are good. You just got to be sure the quality and the torque level and the power level of those stepper motors is set properly.
Yeah, and servos, like steppers, are just motors that spin. They just have one incoming signal just to tell it to move. The servos have an incoming and outgoing signal letting you know it's moving and the location where it's at. Yeah. So it always knows where it's at. So let's say if you're machining something and your machine bumps into something, the servo motors are going to know instantly something's wrong. Let's stop. The steppers, however, it's just going to skip your machine and probably move it or do some kind of damage and just try to keep going. So if you're not right there to stop it, you can do some serious damage with that.
And I have.
I can say I have too.
That's good to know. I didn't know that there was a big difference when it came down to the in and out, input and output of that.
Yeah, and the reason why they're called stepper motors is because there's a pulse that sends, and it just twitches ever so slightly, and it creates what's called a step. And so lots of little pulses are going to tell it when to move up or down or back and forth. And so if you, like he said, if you do something crazy and you hit something hard, your motor's going to continue to turn, and that's going to instantly throw you off where you are in your project G code or the tool path that you've chosen. It can throw you off pretty bad.
So let me ask this. There was a machine that you and I, Chris, were looking at, and the Z topped out, and then it just kept bouncing. Was that a stepper?
It was.
Okay, so a servo would have told it that it's reached its peak to stop bouncing, where the other one just kept bouncing, like it was trying to go higher.
Partially. The real key component to that is some of the cheaper entry-level machines don't have proximity sensors. And a proximity sensor is essentially just a little clip that you put at a certain point on the gantry, and then there's a similar piece on the back of the motor. And when the two come in contact, there's a something that breaks that, creates a little magnetic, whatever you want to call that. Anyway, that tells it, okay, you can't go any further, and it automatically stops it. Some of the lesser expensive machines do not have proximity sensors, and that creates all kinds of other issues in regards to some of the frustration beginners run into, like being able to properly home and have a consistent starting point location on their machine.
I know the X-Carve has the homing switches, so you can home your machine. That's basically a switch at your zero position on all three axes. But it doesn't have a switch at the furthest most point it can go, but it does have soft limits. So soft limits is in your controller software, letting the machine know if you go past this point, you're not going to be able to go any further. So stop when you reach that point. But like we mentioned earlier with the steppers, if it bumps into something and loses its position, it's just going to keep going if it reaches your soft limits and doesn't know where it's at.
Yeah, so do you have that concern? And yes, there are some manufacturers that don't offer that, and you kind of get close to the border and you wait till you hear that, that couple of clicks in a row. Okay, I've reached where I need to stop. But there's ways you can kind of manipulate that and get an understanding of where that is when you're laying out your parts.
Okay. Rick asks, interested in your thoughts on the NEMA 23s versus the NEMA 34s. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to start asking from now on.
I'm no expert at them, but I know generally the bigger ones are better. But like I said, I'm no expert on them. Chris, you have any thoughts on those?
I mean, I've looked at that whenever I was looking at buying an Avid, and obviously the NEMA 34s are a little more expensive. They're an upgrade, so that beyond the understanding of knowing that it's an upgrade, that tells me that the 34s are better. Beyond that, I couldn't give you much educated information on it.
Well, thank you, Rick. Appreciate that question.
Yeah, way to throw us under the bus, Rick.
He's over there Googling right now. Hard CNC questions.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking now, as a beginner, I want the ball screw. I want to know that there's proximity sensors, because I really just want a turnkey outfit. And I'm not really leading this anywhere, but I'm just throwing these things out there to where at the end, you guys can say, okay, these would be a good 3 options for you. Because I'm not going to say a price because I'm doing this hypothetically, but I want a machine for me in how my personality is. That's what I like about CNC, is that really there's so many differences out there. Where do you start? I think it really depends on yourself as a person and what you need to look for in a CNC, knowing how you are and your personality in the shop.
Well, it's if you, and I know you're like me, you're more of a car guy than I am, but you've probably gone out and built a new car just for fun, just to see how much a new car would cost.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I do that with CNCs. I'll go
Me
out
too.
to Shop Sabre and check
Me
out
too.
what that would be. I'll go to Avid and see what that would be. And when you start looking at these kits that offer a lot of upgrade accessories, that price tag goes way up. I was just on SawStop's website the other night and built my dream saw.
Me too.
It's well, I mean, it's the way it is. You look at the final tally and you are going to have to tell yourself, can I afford this? And if you can't, you've got to start learning. You got to figure out what you're willing to sacrifice to still get the best machine that you can get. And I'll promise you, unless your budget's unlimited, I promise you, the one you want will be outside of your budget. And if it's just a little bit outside your budget, just get it. Just do that and know that's the machine you're gonna want. Because if you don't, and I don't know, I read an article one time, and it was a very high percentage. It was like 75% of new CNC owners, the entry level market, within a year within less than a year, they're already ready to upgrade their machine to something bigger, something better, because they realized they didn't get what they wanted.
Yeah.
And so that's my encouragement to all people that I talk to at work is, don't just look at the budget. If you just look at budget, just don't even bother. You don't even want to get into CNC, because that's gonna deter you from buying the machine you need versus the machine you want. And so, or the machine you can afford.
I always looked, my dad, but Chris knows him, always had a rule that if you're going to buy stereo equipment, whatever you really want to buy, just remember you're adding the cost of the cheaper one you settled for to the initial one that you really wanted. So it's going to cost more if you don't get the one you wanted up front and then settle for something only to have to buy the one you wanted later.
Yeah. Shop Sabre has a good, their tagline is buy your second machine first. So
that's a good idea.
Basically what it is.
And they build a solid machine. I honestly, because I'm not much of, I didn't want a kit. I knew I was willing to buy a kit if I could get the one I wanted cheap enough, but I really preferred one that was well built, made out of good steel frame, tube steel, or something heavy. And Shop Sabre, I looked real hard at the Shop Sabre line. And as a matter of fact, when I was working for that other company where I was peddling the router bits, we had actually gone up there and visited them, and were in talks with them about getting our bits packaged with their machines. It never panned out because there was some other things that they wanted that there was no way we would be able to do. But anyway, so I was that's when I first saw their machines, and I was like, ooh, I like that. So
Yeah, I would say they're one of the top line industrial, like affordable machine. It's so-called affordable, depending on your budget, but there's $250,000 machines out there, but I would say Shop Saver is a affordable industrial grade one.
yeah, and their lower end model, I think, was at like 16 to 24,000, something like that, for that smaller machine. So they're a little more up there. But I for what I'm using mine for, I'm super happy with my Axiom. I really like the build quality and the technical, and so I'm happy.
I'm going to say,
Kiana. That's his name.
okay, there you go.
He's the one who invited me to Hawaii. Hi, Kiana.
Then I'm glad you.
He's in my course too.
Apostrophe in the middle. I'm thinking that looks Hawaiian, but
I knew you were gonna have trouble with that one.
yeah, I was like, how do I just say? So K Wong says.
So we have someone in the chat line who said, "I'm fortunate I was."
Unfortunately, I was able to buy a very good machine 5 years ago, as I would have had to buy an upgrade if I did not.
I can attest to that. I've seen his machine. He's got the Freedom machine. Who makes that? I forget who makes it, but it's Freedom line machine, 4x8. He's got the tool changer, vacuum table, real nice machine.
Yeah, when you got to ship it over on a boat, you might as well get what you want.
Yeah, exactly.
Got to pay those fees.
And there's some decent other manufacturers that are sort of in that right around the 10K mark. Was a Cam Master. There's a few others that you can if you're willing to spend 10 grand, you can get a good machine with some good accessories. So,
and one more important thing I would note is customer service with the machine too. That's another important thing.
Absolutely, having that support after the fact was always good.
Thanks, Kiana.
Yep, he says that Kyle has been invaluable since he met him, and Lonnie Kai Craftsman on Instagram.
Yeah, go follow him. He does really good work.
See, Guillermo says, 2 years ago when I started into CNC world, I decided after a lot of research, buy a Shop Saver, and I'm really happy with it. I haven't had a single problem, and I use it 5 days a week. So see,
nice.
I think also customer testimonials, when you go out there, start looking at just groups, that are talking CNC, what they own, what they have. For instance, Learn Your CNC at facebook.com. You can check that one out. But I think it's helpful to find CNC groups that would fit your means of social media intake, if you will.
Yeah, a lot of good CNC groups out there. And actually, on my website, I have a resource for recommended CNC groups. So there's a lot of good ones in there. It's in my learning center. There's a recommended Facebook group page.
Yeah, I found out there's like a ton of stuff that's not, you have to sign up for. Chris was telling me, there's these areas for the students that you cannot access as a regular off the street person.
Yeah, basically the course, the live training and the master course is a membership option.
Do you want to talk about that real quick?
The course?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. It's basically if you want to get into Vectric and you're struggling learning it, I have 2 different course options or both. I have this master course here that he's looking at now, and that's basically runs down how to use all the tools within Vectric and how to implement them into your projects. And then I also offer a live training that's more focused on students' projects. So a student will send me a project in, and then we'll gather together in a group and in a live training. And for an hour, we'll sit there and together in a group and go over the project, answer any questions anybody has. And then after the live training is over, I put it in a replay, include the file if it's available, and members of the group can watch the replays as many times as they want to refresh their memory on anything they missed.
That's awesome. So package 1, you get the private Facebook group. You get lifetime access.
Yes.
It's huge.
That's for the master course,
Master
not
course,
not
right.
the live training.
Right. And then you get free project files for it. And then package 2 is the first package with the live training. So you still get the lifetime.
You get that for a year, the weekly group coaching calls, and then I offer one-on-one training as well if anybody needs more personalized training.
You get a free hour every month, or
No. That's 1 hour for that, and then also separate from all this, I offer the one-on-one training like by the hour if you needed extra help on a project.
there's a lot you offer. I just grabbed the main bullet points there. I was
Yeah,
starting
that's
to go
fine.
through it, and I was like, wow, there's so much on here. And just to tell everyone what the ridiculously low price is, because I know I've
For
told you
now.
this before. For now, yeah, it's $97. Is that right?
For the single package,
For
yeah,
the first
the
package.
course, yeah.
And then $150 for the live training and the first package altogether.
Yep.
So, considering that the software is anywhere between like 300 and 1200, somewhere in there, like it's
Depends, what you go with. Aspire is gonna be the most, around $2,000, and then Cut 2D desktop would be the least. I think that one's around what, $200 or something.
So
But
if you were to
also,
buy those, you can get this. You cover all of that. Sorry to interrupt you.
yeah, that's right. You can do free trial on any one of those. Take the course with the free trial, and decide if it's which one you want to go with before you buy the software.
Tell you what, it's awesome. Where's it at? And Chris, you've started it. You said you were in chapter 4.
Yeah. I mean, I when I got with Kyle, I had already been doing CNC for a little while, and
Thanks, Kevin.
and ended up, chatting with him and started taking a look at the course. And I'll tell you, if there are a ton of free YouTube videos out there, and believe me, I've watched all of the YouTube instructors that are offering free, and most of them are pretty good. I mean, they're good. But the way Kyle breaks it down and the way he puts it into a format that is short, simple, and easy to learn, I would say for what minimal cost he has that set at, I would jump on that, because he's got that course laid out very well. Most of the entry videos are, 15 minutes long, some shorter, some longer, but they're all right around that 10 to 15 mark. And the way he breaks down, especially the beginners part of that, I haven't seen anybody else do that. And so it's no wonder he's kind of jumping on the bandwagon and getting a lot of followers and a lot of subscribers and a lot of people taking the course. So if you're on the fence about it, act now while the price is low.
I mean, that's like stupid low.
Yeah.
And we do have
over 600 students in there now, so it's pretty good.
So do you know when your prices are going to go up, just so we can get people to understand that this will not be the forever price?
Right now, new Vetric version 11 came out, so I'm doing like an overhaul of the videos to bring them up to date, and then once the videos are up to date, I'll probably be raising the price then.
So that's even better. So as an instructor, you're taking the latest software, and then you're also taking your videos and updating them to match that.
Yeah.
That's also not a lot of people do that.
That's included with the master course as well. Free upgrade or like the lesson upgrades.
So Kyle, I got to ask a quick question on that. Are there any concerns with any of your courses being on back order?
I have to check inventory.
I mean, if they're all in stock, act now while supplies last.
Luckily,
with everything else being supply chain driven and being delayed and back ordered and not available for months or years at a time, Kyle's Learn Your CNC Master Course and Master Course Plus Group Training is available and in stock on the shelves, ready to go today.
I saw ahead of time and I stocked up before all this happened.
that was really smart of you.
Yeah.
Getting that extra cloud storage. So the one person that
Thanks, Donald.
yes, thank you, Donald. He said when you're good, and Kyle is good. So the one person we talked
I
to
paid him
last
to say that.
week, you paid him well.
One free class for Donald Harding.
You get an extra hour of one-on-one. So JP Brown was on with us last week, and we had this idea to have you on because he's in this neighborhood of looking for CNC, what to look for, stuff like that. So it's kind of irony that he's late because the hospital network died and he had to fix it, which he had turned the power back on. I take it that it was Windows based.
Well, if you wouldn't have turned the power off to begin with, you wouldn't have had that problem.
You didn't fall asleep on the job.
Maybe that's when Chris cut out earlier.
Could have been. He tried to kill my feed. I see how it is.
Yeah.
You realized that wasn't going to work.
Well, we didn't even talk about a lot of the other topics, and we're already, 5 minutes past our normal hour. So maybe we ought to try to see if we can't pay Kyle some bonus money and bring him on another time to talk about, the accessories that are available, like fourth axis and laser and things like that, and then talk about the bits that are available and what to look for in those. And I don't know, software, key component to running any CNC. And we recommend Vectric because that will drive you to Kyle to want to learn more. And it's not just because Kyle does it, it's because it's one of the better softwares out there for the entry-level market.
Definitely.
And Chris has looked into a lot of them to try to figure out what he was going to use for himself as well as what we could use at the day job to help everyone that was a beginner, someone who's never bought a CNC. We were trying to, on our side of it, especially for Chris, is to offer a support system. And then when he found Learn Your CNC, it was like, well, this kind of takes care of all the stuff I was trying to find. So
yeah,
really nice.
So we're trying to work with. We're trying to figure out what we can do from our day job, how we can partner up with Kyle in some way, and we'll still figure that out. But that's down the line.
There you go.
We're going to drive business his way. I don't know how many people I've already driven your way, but we're gonna.
You've driven a lot.
Keep going. That's kind of the way we're moving right now. So
that's the way we got to do it. I think
it.
Chris knows that. We try to keep a community going with people who are out there like Kyle, who are trying to do something for themselves and at the same time have such a great product. We just didn't see people out there getting enough attention to that product. So, what was I going to say? Do you want to join us again, Kyle?
Sure.
Go for a part 2, which would be accessories and bits, because I was interested in bits, but Chris didn't want to talk about bits. He wanted to talk about stepper.
Cut you off right there.
I know. He was just like, no, there's still stepper motors and all kinds of other stuff.
We gotta finish the machines. I mean, that's like starting to talk about stain, and in the middle of it, you want to go talk about top coats.
I was excited. Okay, so now I know what my gantry stuff is. I know I want water cooled spindles. I just want to get right to the bit. I wasn't thinking about rigidity.
Yeah, I mean, you're in the middle of talking about pigment-based dyes, and you're getting ready to lean into our pigment-based stains, and you're wanting to move into dyes, and then we change the subject to top coats. I mean, you can't do that.
I'm so glad you've learned.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm checking out Kyle's page. Mike drove me there. Well, it wasn't just me. It was also this fantastic banner we have of learnyourcnc.com. And hey, JP, while you're out there driving, why don't you head on over to patreon.com/podcast and put a few, buy Chris a beer. He needs some cheer wine.
Yeah, but we got to spend some time with Kyle last year, so live in a similar sort of setting at our show that we do for our day jobs, and I had already been communicating with him, and had joined his Facebook group, and so I can just knowing what I know of the guy, he's put his heart and soul into that course, and is willing to open himself up to that abuse every Thursday at 5 for if you're interested in that, and those who are already in the group that have joined the chat, we do appreciate you coming over here and talking to us and hanging out with us. We realize it was just for Kyle, but that's okay. We appreciate your time anyway. Kyle's worth it.
Yeah, he is. I don't know what that means. How about no Scott?
I think you meant for the Patreon.
Oh, don't worry about that.
I thought he meant to say, how about no scotch?
Yeah, well. So
Kevin has a good point. 7 Eastern now but that's live.
Okay, I was going to say that because I noticed that on the website it had your next live and it was going to be 7 p.m. And I'm like, I remember Chris always complaining that it's at 5 and he can't make it in time.
Yeah, he kept complaining, so I had to change it.
Oh, good. Good. See, the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
All right.
No,
well,
we had a vote, community vote on the time, because actually, I think it was last week was 1 year. I've been doing the training, the live part of the training. So I figured as a 1 year anniversary, might as well get some feedback from the students and see if they want to change the time. So we did a vote, and it was neck and neck for a while, and then we ended up switching to 7.
Cool.
man, so I guess your students in Hawaii. That's like, oh well, it's time for breakfast. Oh, let me turn Kyle on.
Only 1 p.m. They'll be okay. So Darren says he purchased Kyle's course. Excellent. Having learned an amazing amount of Vectric software, went through the entire course cover to cover. Worth it.
Thank you.
Well, way to put me down. I'm on chapter 4. Thanks a lot.
And you've only, had it for
Sorry about that, Rick.
Yeah, Rick. He's.
All right, now I got to switch it back to 5.
How about just make it 6? Everyone's happy.
Nobody wanted 6. I tried 6.
Really?
Yeah.
It was 7 or 5.
5 or
Tell-
7. That's it.
Tell
I
them,
get-
Kyle. That's what the replay's for.
Exactly.
There you go.
Leave your questions and comments in the chat line.
I'll just do it at a random time every week.
There you go. Between 5 and 7, you'll just pop on.
You can borrow our Wheel of Misfortune, and we'll just change all the misfortune
There we
parts to times, and then just go with it.
Or maybe I'll have a 5 to 8 p.m. class. You just jump in at any time.
There you go.
Wow.
I don't think we'll be doing 11 p.m. But,
Wow.
okay. So thank you, everyone, for watching, hanging out with us tonight. Appreciate everyone who came over from learnyourcnc.com, from Kyle's groups to watch us. We appreciate you joining us.
Before we go, I just want to
yeah.
say I started doing free Vectric tips on my YouTube channel every Friday. So you want to check those out.
Oh, that's cool.
What's your YouTube channel? Just Learn Your CNC?
Yep. Learn Your CNC on YouTube. And then if you want some free tips, every Friday I'm posting a new one.
And go ahead and tell us what the Facebook group name is, so everybody knows that too that doesn't already.
Well, I have 2 groups. So I have the CNC File Help and Support. That's for basic support with all different softwares. And then if you want just the tips, like I just mentioned for Vectric, I have a new group called Vectric Tips and Tricks. So you can check that out as well.
Learn Your CNC, the Facebook.com Learn Your CNC, that is the page.
That's my business page type
Okay.
of, yeah.
And that should have all the links to the groups and everything tied to that as well, right?
Yeah, yep.
There you go.
And you have a new subscriber on your Learn Your CNC at YouTube.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Let's see what else we got before we go. Mahalo. Yep. Thank you for joining us. Kevin says, thanks, guys. Enjoy this. Subscribe to the podcast. Thank you very much.
Thank
Rick
you.
said he's subscribed as well.
Great.
Thank you.
We're going to swap some subscribers here.
Yeah. It's all about the community base,
Exactly.
right? And we've been wanting to, sorry. Not going to say it, Chris. I'm not going to say it.
Were you petting your cat again?
Yes. Except for I wasn't paying enough attention, obviously, and it clawed me, but that's fine. Yeah, that's how this works. There's no way around that without it sounding like it's in the gutter. I just now realized. So, on that note, hey, thanks for joining. Wednesday at 9 p.m. I am Mike Z.
I'm Chris.
I'm Kyle.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great night and enjoy the rest of your week.
See you next time.